The Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings are in a club of their own. And we're going to talk about this on today's episode because I find it quite fascinating, and I think you will as well. But a quick show update if you did not see the announcement already. This upcoming Friday, May 23rd, will be my last day hosting Falcons Today. It will be my last day at Chat Sports altogether. I'm making a complete career change, and I'll talk about that in more detail on the 23rd, just so I don't keep repeating myself and you guys don't keep hearing the same message over and over again. But very bittersweet moment because I've loved working here and I've loved hanging out with you guys, but excited for what's next for me. So more on that later on. But sadly, we are entering the last week of my time hosting this channel. Now, let's get into the show because Taryn Wack, who does a great job of covering the team for the team itself, she did some digging and noticed a handful of first-round draft picks who went to more than one college. And on top of that, she wanted to see, all right, team by team, are there any teams that picked guys who only attended one school? And sure enough, the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings were the only teams to meet that criteria. Now, there's a few ways you can look at this. One way you can look at it is the Falcons and Vikings have a type. They don't want players who don't have loyalty, who transfer when the going gets tough, right? They want guys who are committed. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is they only had 5 draft picks. So fewer opportunities to pick players who attended multiple schools. We'll take a closer look at which one I think is more accurate. I'm kind of in the middle because on one hand, with just 5 draft picks, I don't think this is something to make a big deal out of if there is a big deal to make. But if we take a step back and look all the way from 2021 to present day, when Terry Fontenot has been the GM of this team, you'll see he has drafted 36 players in that span. 5 drafts. Of those 36 players, only 2 attended multiple schools. Michael Penix, Indiana, and Washington. And can you guys name the other? It's not some random 6th or 7th round pick. It's a notable day 1, day 2 pick. Give you a second. Arnold Ebiketie started off at Temple and then went to Penn State. So I'm leaning towards it's not just a big fat coincidence that, the Falcons only had 5 picks and none of them went to multiple universities. In this year, 2025, I'll buy it. Overall thinking for Atlanta, not buying it. Because I've got 5 drafts to look at. And 34 of the 36 players selected by Fontenot only attended one school. Now, we can look back at some of those draft classes here as you guys look at the 2025 draft picks from round 1 who attended more than one college. In 2021, Fontenot's first year as the Atlanta Falcons GM, you got to think about the players in that class. They all played from 2018 to 2020. The transfer portal was not that big of a deal at that point. So I'll give them a pass for 2021 and 2022 just because you weren't going to find a lot of players in the draft to begin with who attended multiple colleges. But 2023, 2024, 2025, those are 3 classes where the prospects all played, the junior, senior year of their collegiate careers in 2021, 2022, 23, 24, and that was filled with transfers. So of the 5, 2 of them came into eras where there just weren't a lot of transfer players to begin with. So it'd be hard to find a transfer player in the draft. But the last 3 drafts, it wouldn't be difficult to find players who hopped around a little bit. And that's why I think going into 2026 and beyond, for as long as Fontenot is, the GM of this team, let's see if this pattern continues. And if it does, it gives you a, inside, piece of information or, a pattern or something to keep an eye on for when trying to predict who Atlanta takes in next year's draft. If there's a guy who attended 2, 3 colleges, you might cross him off the list. It may not be a good reason to cross him off the list. I'm not trying to defend the reasoning of there should be loyalty, and if you go to more than one school, when you get to the NFL, you're not going to be committed. Now, I mean, they took Michael Penix, so clearly it couldn't have been that big of a red flag to them. But 36 out of 38 picks attending one college over 5 years, that's a good enough sample size for me to go, there's probably something here. It may not be a big thing, but I do think it's a part of the decision making. I do think it finds itself on the pros column sheet for the Falcons. I can't speak to the Vikings. I didn't do their research for their last 5 drafts or whatever. So Vikings may just be a pure coincidence or a pure reflection of you only have 5 picks. If you had 8 picks, that's 3 more players to get drafted and 3 more opportunities to take someone who went to multiple colleges. So for this year, it's probably a result of just having 5 picks. But encompassing all 5 drafts, it's probably a result of something that plays a role in determining who Atlanta picks. I'd hope not a big role, but I think it is a role. Speaking of colleges, by the way, before we move on to the second half of today's episode, shout out your college for me in the comment section below. We like to do shout out your city every so often, so if you prefer that, you can do that route. But let me know where you went to school. Go Vols, and would love to see a bunch of different schools all across the country littered in the chat. Now, let's switch gears altogether and talk about the Falcons' schedule, because I like to look at the schedule from a couple of different vantage points, right? The first vantage point is like, as a fan, like a travel, like, all right, how does this impact my schedule? Maybe you've got a wedding. By the way, if you were a friend's wedding in October, they shouldn't be your friend. But if you've got something like that, you got a trip planned or anything of like that sorts, you want to look at the schedule selfishly, how it impacts you. The next way I want to look at it is, how does it impact the Falcons? Because not all schedules are created equal. In fact, rest plays a major factor in determining who are the biggest winners and losers from the schedule. So take the Raiders, for example. They have negative 19 rest days. What that means is their opponents overall 18 weeks will have 19 extra days of rest total before they play the Raiders. So if the Raiders play on Sunday and the next week they play an opponent who recently played on Monday night, well, the Raiders have 1 extra day of rest, right? They played on Sunday and their opponent played on Monday. Yeah, the Raiders had that actually happen to them the opposite way, and it tallied up to 19 negative days of rest. The biggest beneficiary is the Detroit Lions at plus 13. So where does Atlanta fall in line? Pretty much right in the middle at -1. So nothing to really bitch about. It would be better to be the Jags at +1, but you could be the Raiders at nearly 3 weeks of negative rest compared to your opponents across all 17 games. As for the NFC South, you can see it's more favorable than the Saints, who are at 31, the Carolina Panthers at -5, and you're not far behind the Buccaneers at +2. So not a bad spot for the Falcons to be, and I won't say the NFL screwed Atlanta over. But I do want to look at some of the games where they did get kind of screwed over, because there's one in particular that has me a little riled up. But if you want to get a Jalen Walker jersey or a James Pierce Jr. jersey, go to chatsports.com/ATL rookies. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. It's a great way to get yourself a brand new Falcons jersey before 2025 season gets underway and support the channel. Plus, it's a quality jersey from Fanatics. Use this link, chatsports.com/ATL rookies. So let's talk about some of the advantages, disadvantages, the overall quirks of the schedule. It starts off early for the Falcons, who actually benefit from an example like I gave for the Raiders, okay? The Falcons play on Sunday week 1, but the Vikings, who they play in week 2, they play on Monday night. So they have 1 less day of rest going into week 2 against Atlanta. So that's +1 for the Falcons in the rest column. Moving on now. Week 6, the Falcons play the Bills. This is another example of Atlanta getting a bit of a boost in the schedule here, because in week 5, the previous week, the Falcons have an early bye, which is not that big of an advantage long term, but short term it is, because in week 5, the Bills are playing against the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. Then week 6, they meet on Monday night. So Atlanta will be fresh off their bye, whereas Buffalo will be playing the previous week, and back-to-back primetime games, which might be a little bit tiresome to go, night game in consecutive weeks. Move ahead here to week 12 when the Falcons go to New Orleans and they play the Saints. This is something that goes against the Falcons because in week 11, the previous week, the Saints are on their bye. Meanwhile, that week 11 game for Atlanta is home against the Panthers. So New Orleans comes into their week 12 matchup against Atlanta fresh off the bye, whereas the Falcons have been playing a week before. And then last but not least, week 17, the Falcons host the Rams on Monday Night Football. But I want to look at what they were doing in week 16. Atlanta traveling all the way across the country and playing the Arizona Cardinals. Meanwhile, in week 16, the Rams are going to Seattle and playing on Thursday night. So think about it this way. The Rams go from Thursday all the way till Monday. So they got 3 extra days of rest. Really a bonus day too, because they don't usually go from Thursday to Sunday. They go from Thursday to Monday, so almost like a bye, a half a bye, if you will. Whereas Atlanta will be just playing 8 days away after their Week 16 matchup versus the Rams, who are playing a whole 11 days away from that Monday matchup in Week 17. So just a couple of fun little schedule quirks, but all in all, kind of balances out. We saw some advantages for the Falcons early in the season and then some disadvantages later in the season. But who do you think is going to have more wins in 2025? The Falcons or the Buccaneers? We did Saints last week, and I was like, that seems too easy. So let's actually go with the team that's been winning the division the last couple of years, the Buccaneers. Let me know in the comment section. To wrap it all up, let's pick a viewer out of the chat for 2 claps. So here we go. 2 claps going to Chad. Loses it. I'm sorry. Goes to Nicholas. 2 claps for Nicholas. 1, 2. I'll see everyone next time.